Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to learn how to basically insert some values into the database. So the very first thing which we need to do is that we need to go to the phpMyAdmin, and as you could see, this is the database right here, which is nothing but it is called as project. So simply open this thing up, and when we go to users, as you could see, there is nothing right now in our table. So basically when you go to structure, as you could see, these are the four fields in which we could insert values, but we have not yet added a script so as to insert the values into the database. So in the previous tutorial we have created this table which is called as users inside the database called as project, and this table is empty right now, so we actually need to add in data to this database. And in the previous tutorial we have also created a script which is called as init.php. so the script init.php is basically a script which is used to connect to the database. So in order to test the script, we simply typed in localhost, then the name of our folder was project, and we typed in init.php, and we got the result as connection successful, which basically means that we are now connected to the database. Now our next step would be, once the connection is successful, we actually need to insert some values into the database using MySQL statements. So basically, as we have created a script for connecting to a database using PHP, we are now going to create a PHP script so as to basically enter values into the database. So again, we open up our favorite text editor. So mine is Atom. So I'm going to open up Atom, and I'm going to basically create a new script in Atom. So I go to file, new file, and let's type in a PHP tag here. So PHP, and we are going to save this file in the same folder as we have stored the init file. So simply go ahead and save this thing. So basically go to C, XAMPP, htdocs, and project, and let's name this thing as, let's say you want to basically sign up the user. So we type the file name as register.php, click save, and once the file is saved, we could go ahead and write in some code so as to insert some values. Now the very first thing which we need to do is that we actually need to connect to the database so that we could actually insert some values into it. So basically, in order to connect to the database, we need this script right here. So what you could do is that instead of just copying and pasting the entire things of this script over here in register.php, we could use a simple thing which is called as require. So we type in require, and in double quotes we type in the name of the file, which is nothing but init.php. So what this thing basically does is that it is going to execute the line of code which is present in init.php, and after this, and after it is going to execute the next line of code which we are going to write in. So once we have basically established a connection, the next thing which we need to do is that we actually need to insert the values. So now we have four values to fill in. So the very first value which we are going to pass in is name, then the password, then contact, and then the country. So in order to fill these values using PHP, MySQL, we type in, first we create the variables. So we type $name, and in there we are going to pass in the name. So I'm going to pass in my name. Then after the name we are going to pass in the password. So I type $password, and let's say my password is like ashu123. and now the next thing which we pass in is the contact number. So I pass in my contact number. So we type $contact equals, and let's say my contact number is 0000 and 0. And after this we pass our country. So again we type in $country equals, and type in the country name. Okay, so once we have these 4 variables set up, then we form a SQL query so as to basically insert these values into the database. So we type $SQL underscore query. This should be SQL, not SQLite. So $SQL underscore query equals, and in double quotes we type in our query. So the basic SQL query so as to insert values into the database is insert. Then after insert we type insert into, and then we type in the database name. So the name of our database is users, so insert into users. After that we type in values, VALUES, and then after this we pass in the values in brackets. So the very first value which we want to pass in is the name, so we type $name. After this we pass in the second value which is password, so we type $password. After this we pass in the contact, so we type $contact. After this the country, so we type in $country. This should be N, so, and actually I have misspelled country here, CO. This should be, there should be a U here. Okay, so now once this query is set up, we are good to go. And also make sure that you include these things in double quotes. So there should be, these variables should be actually mentioned in single quotes. So make sure that you do this thing. So insert quotes everywhere. So once you have added the quotes, the next thing which we do is that we basically end this statement with a semicolon, which is nothing but which is the MySQL query, and also end the PHP statement with a semicolon. And also I've made a mistake here, this should be insert. Okay, so once we are done with setting up the SQL query, we could finally go ahead and run this query. So in order to run this query, if we type in if MySQLi underscore query, and to the query, and to this we pass in the connection variable, so we type $connection. Even if the connection variable is not actually present in the register.php, but if we switch to the init, as you could see, the connection variable is present right over here. So we pass in the connection as well as the SQL query, so we type $SQL query. So what this thing does is that it returns us the result, and actually I again made a mistake here, this should be SQL query. So once this thing is done, the next thing which we do is that on executing this query, we want to display like the data has been inserted, so we type echo and type in data inserted. Or else if the query actually has an error, and if there is a problem inserting values into the database, we want to echo like error. So basically once we are done with this, we are good to go. So we simply save the code and we run this thing on the server. So we go right here, and instead of init.php, now we type register.php and hit enter. And as you could see, we got the result as connection successful, data inserted. So in order to check if the data is actually inserted into the database, what we do is that we switch to this localhost right here, and we go inside the table which is nothing but users. So we simply click on it, and as you could see, we have the values of name, password, contact and country right over here. So basically we are successful in inserting the records into the database. So basically once we are done with inserting values into the database, the next thing would be to basically retrieve the data from the database. So for retrieving values from the database, we are going to create one more script. So let's name this script as, let's say, the script to basically, let's say, login. So basically we have the user info. Now we are going to check the user info present in the database with the info provided by us, and if they match up, then we go ahead and print out the value inside the database. So let's create a new script for login. So create a new file. Again, this is also going to be a PHP file, and let's go ahead and save this file in the same location. So C XAMPP htdocs and the project folder. So let's name this as login.php. Hit enter, and now let's go ahead and type in the code so as to basically make the user login. So in order to save time, we are going to copy the contents of this file right here, and the reason for this is that basically the code is going to be the same with a few changes here and there. So the very first thing which we change is that we change the SQL query. So now what we want to do here is that we want to query the database and check if a person which has the username Ashu and the password as Ashu123 is actually present in the database. So basically, in order to check, the query is different. So for checking the value, for checking if the value is present, we use a query which is called as select. So we type select, and the name of the element which we want to select here is, let's say, name. So we select name from, and then we type in the name of the database from which we want to basically search. So the name of the database is nothing but users. So we type select name from users where. Now the where is basically a keyword which is used to search where, or it is used to specify a condition. So from users where name is like $name. So basically we want to search for a value where name is actually equal to the variable $name, or the value which is present in the $name, and password like $password. So this is the basic SQL query which we want to execute. So once this query is done, we specify a semicolon, and the next thing which we do is that we also ensure that these things are actually present in double quotes. So make sure that you don't miss on double quotes here, or else your code is not going to work properly. So make sure that you give double quotes and also end the SQL statement with a semicolon. Now once this thing is done, we are also going to make a modification here. So basically we are going to delete this, and in there we are going to keep this line of code which is basically used for executing the SQL query, and actually we are going to store it in a variable called result. So we type result equals MySQL query, and basically the execution result is going to be stored in the variable called result. Now the main purpose of storing this into the result variable is that we are going to need to use this result variable in the next line of code. So basically once we have the result in hand, we actually use an if condition so as to check if we actually get any result. So we type if, and then we type in my SQLi underscore num underscore rows, and to this we are going to pass in the result. So we type $result, and if this thing is greater than 0, and what this line of code means is that if the number of rows in actual result, if it is greater than 0, that means we have found a match to the username and the password. So in that case, what we want to do is that we basically want to, what you could say, display out the username. So we type $row equals, and basically we fetch that particular row, and fetching is nothing but saving the data of that row. So we type my SQLi underscore, this should be my, not mu, my SQLi underscore fetch underscore ASSOC, and to this we pass in the result. So we type $result. So what this thing is going to do is that it is going to fetch the row associated with that particular result, and we are actually going to get the value of the name. So in order to save the value of name, we type $name equals, and we type in $row and within the row we actually want a parameter which is called as name. So what this line of code is going to do, it is basically going to extract the name from the row and it is going to store it into a variable called name. So once we have the name, we simply need to echo out the name. So we type echo and simply type in $name. So after this we go inside the else block and we actually replace and we actually type in an error if this thing does not happen well. So once we are done with this, we basically save the code and we try to run this thing and check if the login is successful. So we type in login.php and as you could see, the login is successful and we actually got the name of the user, which is Ashu. And now let's go ahead and let's change the password to some random things so as to check if this thing actually performs correctly. So again we return back to the browser and when we refresh it, this time we got an error, and the reason for that is the username and password does not match up. Now again, if we change this thing to the initial value and save it, and if we return back here and if we refresh it, we are going to get the result as connection successful, and it is also going to return us the value of the user. So that's it for this tutorial, and this is basically how you insert the values into a database using PHP and MySQL. And this is how we basically, what you could say, retrieve the values to check if the value is actually present in the database. So the reason why we are going through this is that basically we need to clear up the concepts related to PHP and MySQL, and these are the same exact scripts which we will be using while connecting our Android application to an online database. So that's it for this tutorial, and I hope you guys understood how to basically insert values and retrieve values from a database using PHP and MySQL. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.